Spoiler warning, although realistically you've already seen the ending. As I'm writing this script, the finale of the Attack on Titan anime has just been released. 10 years since the first episode was released, and 14 years since the first chapter was released. Now, I understand how divisive this ending is, and believe me, I know there are issues with it, which I will get to later, but in my opinion, that doesn't invalidate how good the series was. So in this video, I want to talk about my experience with and opinion of Attack on Titan, as well as my view on the ending. I'm not trying to invalidate anyone's opinion on this topic, but I want to discuss both sides of the argument before then talking about, regardless of anyone's thoughts on said ending, good or bad, why Attack on Titan is still amazing. So the Attack on Titan anime was the first anime I ever watched. You can skip this part if you want, it's just how I experienced it. You can skip to the discussion using the timestamps. But anyway, recommended by a friend and one of my cousins. At the time I was in year 8 and I don't know what that is abroad, like academic years. So I was 13 if I remember correctly, so it was in 2017, which in hindsight doesn't seem that long ago. So much has happened since then for anime and in the real world. Anyway, I refused to watch it at first because, I hadn't watched any anime yet and I just assumed it was a weird cartoon. Ironic considering what I'm doing now. I eventually did watch the first episode and let me tell you, it did not go well. I remember vividly how much it scared me and it gave me a couple of sleepless nights and I didn't touch it for months after that. When I did decide to continue, surprisingly, I feel like I took to the anime as a medium quickly. It didn't feel weird watching it. Obviously, I'm saying this now as a 19-year-old looking back, because I probably wasn't thinking about anime as a medium of storytelling back when I was 13. It was my first anime, as I said, my gateway anime, so I did watch it in the dub for the first 2 seasons, and when the 3rd season began airing soon after, I watched that weekly in the dub as well, before I got impatient and just decided to catch up to the sub instead. And of course by this time I was already hooked. And one thing on the dub of Attack on Titan, looking back on it, it's surprisingly good. Think about the most impactful scenes in the story. Erwin's speech in the dub is done really well.
They were not! Their memory serves as an example to us all! The courageous fallen, the anguished fallen. Their lives have meaning because we, the living, refuse to forget them! And as we ride to certain death, we trust our successors to do the same for us! Because my soldiers do not buckle or yield when faced with the cruelty of this world! My soldiers push forward! My soldiers scream out! My soldiers rage!
Of course, I prefer the sub overall now, but anyway. I stuck with the anime up until the end of season 3 before switching and catching up to the manga, and then reading each new chapter as it was released, while also watching the anime when it was airing. So that's how I experienced Attack on Titan, and I was 100% a casual, I'm not afraid to say, when watching the anime. I understood the themes that the story was conveying, but only on a surface level, nothing deeper than that. Eren wanting revenge, freedom, finding out the truth. It was only upon switching to the manga and rewatching that I got deeper into the plot. So now my views on said plot, it will be my views now rather than my views when I first watched it 6 years ago. There's not a real structure to this part now that I'm looking back on my script. It's just gonna be me talking, so bear with me here. From the beginning, Attack on Titan has one of the best openings to a story. There's a reason why the colossal titan peeking over the wall is iconic as it is. The feeling of complete helplessness accompanied with the orchestral theme in the anime, it's just so well done. I mean, we hear Eren complain about being stuck in the walls, and we do get a brief explanation to begin with, but seeing a skinless giant kick a hole in a 50-meter tall wall and a massacre ensuing, what the heck just happened? I explained before how much it traumatized me when I was younger, and now after watching many more different anime, I can confidently say that nothing else made me feel this way. Granted, I am older now, so I am more used to these kind of shocks, so maybe that's a big aspect of it. But regardless, it's one of the most amazing ways a story has begun. And then as we move through the rest of the story, the mysteries, the titans, the titan shifters, the basement that arguably play the most important role of keeping us invested in the story. There's nowhere where it drags. Each arc flows smoothly into the next, where the story feels continuous, if that makes sense. It feels like one huge arc. And as for another part of Attack on Titan where there is smooth progression, it's with the characters. And when I say smooth, I mean well written, because the course that this story takes our characters on is anything but smooth. The main character, Eren, or better yet, starts out simple enough with wanting revenge for his mother's death, and we see his visceral hatred for the Titans. Alongside him is Mikasa, a girl who Eren's parents took in after hers were killed, who is a protector of sorts of Eren, as well as his friend Armin, who wants to see the outside world beyond the walls and puts this idea into Eren's head. The three amigos who go through the most traumatizing stuff put to page in a shonen. Yeah, a shonen. This gives seinen manga a run for its money. And Eren's development is a sight to behold. First driven out of revenge as a kid, early on he's very impulsive, but he doesn't push his shortcomings onto others. He only looks to himself for that kind of thing, if you notice. He turns into the one thing he hates most in the world, the Titans. He is forced to fight fire with fire, and as we go on and he learns more about the world, there is less and less of himself there that was there at the beginning. His original goal of eliminating the Titans, which seems like such a massive goal, eventually becomes a side note in what is really going on in the world, and his personality from earlier in the story kind of does the same thing, becomes a side note to a full emptiness in his head. Full in the sense of him now being fueled by the tragic truth of the world, and empty in the sense that he becomes more and more isolated as the story goes on. The friendships that he had are becoming inconsequential in the face of the cruel world. Everything he knew and believed in was nothing but a deception which twisted his mind. A freedom driven by Armin's words of wanting to see the outside world, mangled into a freedom driven by hatred of newfound oppressors in the form of Marley and said outside world. He has been molded into this by his surroundings, and ultimately the tragedy is how he eventually lost himself in his pursuit for freedom and went down a worse path than those who oppressed him in the first place. Next is the extended side cast, which is mostly made up of the members of the military's 3 divisions, and many of those who were recruits who trained alongside our main 3. They all grow close and grow together as people, and each of them have their own story to tell. Learning Eren has the ability to turn into a Titan is insane, but compound that ability of turning into a Titan with a betrayal plot, and now you have the secondary 3 amigos, Annie, Bertold and Reiner. From the introduction of the female Titan all the way to the return of Shiganshina, we don't get the full picture of who they really are or why they are doing this, but what we do get is massively revealing glimpses into their psyche. And of course, Reiner is Exhibit A. Meeting him in the training camp, he acts as a big brother to everyone there. He's the reliable and responsible one. And flash forward to when he reveals the truth about him and Bertold, he lays it out with a look on his face, one of regret over the situation he's found himself in, but also one of fear. And what we get is possibly one of the most iconic betrayals in anime. We find out later that he infiltrated the walls years earlier, but his response to the so-called devils wasn't what he expected. He grew attached to them after being with them for so long. A split personality, one that is on full display as he talks with Eren and Ymir in the trees. On one side, he is an honorary Marleyan warrior. On the other, he still thinks he's a scout. He talks as if he has no idea about his life before entering the walls, as if all he's known is being a member of the scout regiment with everyone. Same thing when he watches Marco get eaten, when he himself aided in that. So back to his face when he reveals the truth, it's as if he's scared of himself. His warrior side has clashed head on with his scout side, and it's like he's just now learning the truth about himself just as Eren is. The truth that he's always known, which results in 2 tormented halves. And in the Male arc, we see that this all led him down a horrendously dark path. Death would free him of it all, yet in a sad bit of irony, he continues to walk on. And speaking of the Male arc, this is probably the biggest shift in the story. We know about how the other Titan shifters are from the outside world, but we are now in an entirely new setting, and it's not just the surroundings that have changed. This is where the animation studio changes from WIT to MAPPA, and that animation change suits the shift in location as well, but also characters as well, both old and new, because this is after a 4-year time skip. This arc, we get a new perspective on the world, as people of the same race as the people living within the world are treated, are oppressed, and how the world views them as devils thanks to the power of the Titans. This now signals the endgame, the penultimate story arc, where we have our characters fighting for their freedom against the supposed big bad in the oppressors, the nation of Mali. And then
戦えミカサ、お前が大嫌いだった。お前が選べ。壁の巨人はこの島の外にあるすべての地表を踏み鳴らす。そこにある命をこの世から駆逐するまで。
So about that endgame, Eren as the villain, the final threat after everything they've been through, is a brilliant choice, because he became so corrupted by his experiences that as he doubled down in his pursuit for freedom, he had kind of forsaken himself in order to go through with it. Reiner and Bertholdt's betrayal, the truth of the world beyond the walls, all contributed to his thought process where he needed to become a greater evil than the evil that he was facing. And now the final chapter. What does the final chapter do for his character and the rest of the story? Bear in mind that although the manga and anime endings are pretty much the same, there are some small changes that do make a big difference, and I'll go over the manga first and then the changes in the anime that fixed things up. So first, let's briefly go over the details leading up to the ending. We have the rumbling, with Eren having full power of the Founding Titan and everyone's trying to stop him. By this point, we know about the Attack Titan's ability to see the memories of past and future users, which Eren interacted with to cause the current events of the story. And there's also the realm of the paths, where all time occurs at once. Past, present, and future flows simultaneously. The founder is bound to something that is keeping the curse of the Titans from disappearing. A lot happens and Mikasa lobs off Eren's head. This is where Eren has individual conversations in the past using the paths with everyone, or at least the key figures who have been with us since the beginning. But we only see omens. To begin with, we learn Eren tried to get everyone against him so that they could be the heroes who defeated him, thus changing the world's view on the Eldians. Very Code Geass, and there's nothing wrong with this. This is fine. The founder Ymir is still bound to King Karl Fritz even after 2,000 years, and Eren says this is because she still loved him. So this is the first controversy, the reason that the curse of the Titans persisted and she continued to serve him after 2 millennia isn't because of a grand revelation, but love. Now, the main argument in support of this is that Ymir supposedly developed Stockholm Syndrome. Now, I don't know enough about Stockholm Syndrome to make my own judgment on this topic. I know it's about developing feelings or a bond with your captor, but I am very sure it's much more detailed and much more nuanced than that. And Stockholm Syndrome in and of itself isn't really the most uplifting thing to talk about. So I don't know whether this is true or this argument holds up, or if it doesn't hold any value at all. I've seen this one video of saying why it isn't, but I won't talk about that here, and I'll let you make your own judgments on it rather than my view. Fair warning, I don't think this person is the biggest fan of the ending. And moving on, we learn that Mikasa was the key to all of it, the one Ymir was waiting for, which is straight out of left field. But the symmetry is that as Mikasa lets go of her bond with Eren, the founder lets go of her bond with King Fritz. So Mikasa's character is a bit of a tricky one, because her devotion to Eren makes sense due to him saving her life, and the fact that the world they live in is completely unforgiving, but that doesn't leave much room for anything else. So having her be the key to the founder Commander Ymir after all of this rather than Eren is a bit jarring. Maybe I missed something, who knows. So moving on in the conversation, we learn that Eren experiences all of time at once. That Eren had a path laid out this whole time. Eren directed Dina Fritz's Titan to his mother. This is the first difference I noticed in the anime and manga. So firstly, the thing about him seeing all of time at once and having a path already laid out kind of invalidates his earlier motives. Kill all Titans to avenge his mother. But he caused that, and he knows he caused that. And his pursuit for freedom. His mother died because he made the choice to follow that path that was already laid out. So if he knew how everything would happen and he decided to stick to that, then was he ever even after his own freedom? And finally, we have two very iconic panels. And I say iconic for all the wrong reasons. The first one comes after Armin punches Eren for ignoring Mikasa's feelings, as he has done for the entire series. And Eren breaks down so sudden, like you feel a whiplash from it because of how out of the blue it is. Like, if I'm being honest, I kind of assumed that he did have feelings for her, but after 99% of the story passed and nothing really changed, I just thought maybe not. And then Eren does this. He's broken down before, like with Ramsey, but he broke down then because of the weight of the past, present and future of the world on his shoulders. Here, yeah, you get the point. This one doesn't really impact the greater story that much, but I saw fit to mention it. And the second panel is this. Armin thanking Eren for becoming a mass murderer for their sake. I assume the intentions were either Armin thanking Eren for the lengths he was willing to go through for them, or Armin trying to alleviate some of the guilt on Eren's shoulders. But either way, this line sticks out like a sore thumb. Also, apparently Eren kind of forgot why he did it, so yeah. Now for the anime changes and additions. So with Eren having seen how things would play out and him causing the death of his mother, we do get a new line in the anime where Eren says that while it was all determined, he tried over and over. He tested it but found no success, as things would end up the same in the future, which I interpret as meaning the death of his mother was somehow part of the least worst things that led to future events, if you know what I mean, which is just tragic. And another way this improves upon the original is that it means Eren did try his hardest to find a better way to freedom, whereas in the manga he kind of just accepted that this is how it was and he had no freedom. So with this addition in the anime, Eren's path it better represents him being a slave to freedom. Next, we get an anime original scene. Armin breaks down after hearing about Eren's destruction in the future, as any person would, compared to this one panel being all we really get in the manga. And although Eren still says that he didn't know why he did it, he expands on that and says that he thought he was doing it for them, for saying how many of his comrades still ended up dying, for calling himself an idiot and essentially blaming himself for the outcome. Then, rather than thanking Eren for being a mass murderer, Armin thanks Eren for showing him the sights beyond the walls. It was Armin who put that idea into Eren's head in the first place, so Armin decides to shoulder the responsibility of all this with him. This scene to me is so ridiculously good, a fully realized conversation between these two, and the visual metaphor of Armin holding the seashell while Eren held teeth and hair is the chef's kiss. And Levi, seeing all of his slain comrades in front of him now that it's all over, is the best thing ever. Now moving forward a bit, we see Historia celebrating her child's birthday. Now the thing with Historia is that people thought she would have a bigger role in this end, which I get, but what would she have done while everyone else is on the front lines? So her not doing anything doesn't bother me. And there's the kid, the question of who's the father, which didn't mean anything really at the end of the day. Was it Eren or this farmer boy? It didn't matter. And again, I'm okay with that because what I'm focused on is how normal this scene looks. It's a child's birthday party, and don't forget that this kid is an Eldian. So now that the world is free for now, I guess, this normal situation for an Eldian kid is just a sign of how things have changed. And for that reason, I really like it. Now we are skipping forward right to the end. You see Eren's grave, which Mikasa cries beside before a bird tugs on the scarf before flying away. Of course, the bird representing freedom, and now Eren is free. We see her grow old, although it's more unclear in the anime. We see her at Eren's grave with John and a kid in the future. There's implications there, but we're not talking about them. Anyway, we see them grow old and Mikasa is buried beside Eren. And in the back, we see civilization progress, but the cycle of violence and hatred continue. Again, this is better in the anime because in the manga we only see progression up to skyscrapers from around the late 1900s in real life, and if you say Mali's buildings and tech is from around the early to mid 1900s in real life, then there's only a few decades passing before everything just goes to shit again. So Eren's dream isn't fully realized, but in the anime there are more futuristic looking skyscrapers, so who knows how long has passed. And although the cycle of hatred still does continue, Eren achieved his goal of getting freedom for everyone, since everyone we knew was definitely able to live out their lives peacefully. So the cycle continuing after their deaths is perfectly fine with me. And the very last scene of the entire series, a child and their dog stumble across the very same tree that Ymir did to come across the hallucinogenia worm and bring about the Titans. So this heavily implies the worm isn't dead and this child and their poor dog is gonna come into contact with it. I don't know about this. I'm fine with the violence continuing because that's just the nature of humanity, but this tree scene genuinely does seem to put us back to square one. I've seen an argument stating that Ymir found the tree when she was in a state of fear, whereas this kid found it out of their own curiosity. So maybe that could change the outcome, but I doubt that, since if conflict and war are still prevalent in the world, there is no way the Titan power is going to be used for good. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the ending, and I think I'm just about done here. My first anime, the one that started it all, before I watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Tokyo Ghoul, and so on, it sent me down a massive rabbit hole of becoming a fully realized weeb, and for that it will always hold a special place. But even beyond sentimentality, the story itself is one that I hold amongst the very best. Everyone has their opinions on the ending, and now you know that even I think that it wasn't perfect, and yet in my personal opinion, I would still say that this story is amazing.